Welcome everyone. Welcome to FOIA Friday, a community podcast about all things in the world FOIA and public records. Call it a podcast because I spend a lot of time doing research and reporting and putting together notes for these calls, and also a lot of time talking. But I put the word community in there as well because there are a lot of people who are on this call filing public records requests, answering interesting questions about public records and their communities. And I want to make sure I continue to bring you all into the call, ask you questions, field your questions, and make this call something collaborative. I've been dropping the notes for today's call in the chat, and I'm going to do so one more time. Uh, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen to go over those notes. Uh, Like I said, this is FOIA Friday. For those of you who have been here before, you've seen this tip sheet or a tip sheet like this. I put these together for every call. Inside are a lot of notes about the things we're going to talk about today, and lots of links as well. At the very top, we have a session question and feedback form. That's a Google form that you can fill out as many times as you want and as often as you want, asking questions about public records that you have. I take a look at that before every call to see if there's something new that I haven't gotten to that I want to prioritize or put back to the group. So put in your questions there. If you have any general feedback and you want to make this call more interesting in any way, that's the place to do it as well. We got a lot on the agenda today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. But first, a word from our sponsors. Just kidding, we don't have sponsors at MuckRock. We don't have ads. We don't have a paywall. We benefit a lot from donations. So if you're feeling generous during the holiday season, please consider donating to MuckRock. Through the end of the year, the Bar Foundation will be matching up to $3,500 for any donation we receive. So your donation will go further now than any other time. If donating is not your thing, you can also buy some cool public records swag. We just got our store back up and running, and we have a couple things there, a few t-shirts, and then a throwback hoodie. Buy that for the muckrakers in your life or for yourself. Right now, I am wearing one of our FOIA acronym t-shirts. This is a artisanal FOIA t-shirt. It is comfort colors for anyone who's familiar with the brand from the New Jersey boardwalks. It's super soft yeah, very comfortable, well-fitting. So consider checking out our swag as well. Okay, now to the good stuff. We got a lot to go through, and I'm going to just start by filing a request and giving you all a couple minutes. If there's a request you've been wanting to file and haven't filed, now is the time. I'm going to file this request for Philadelphia police repair orders. In previous calls, I've highlighted this GitHub that Patrick Maynard put together. Oops, let's go back. With rosters of forms from police agencies across the state. It's a really cool resource. He's been requesting these rosters of forms, which are just basically lists of all the forms that police agencies hold for lots of different states and local agencies. There's some really interesting stuff in there. I live in Philadelphia, so I'm going to request something from the Philadelphia form list from 2019. Think it should be applicable still. I hope they're still using the same forms or they call it the same thing. Down here, I found let's see, where is it? Repair order. So this is what I'm looking for. That is oops, form 82S91. Uh,
So do you put the links there in that spreadsheet
the AJ, the links for what?
for the responses? Like
To
if you receive the particular record, is that where you put it?
Yeah, I'll put it back into the uh oh, sorry, I see what you mean. No, this is actually the spreadsheet from the Philadelphia police. I'm not sure
Oh,
why
okay.
they had the they had a few things, a few columns for you to actually fill out yourself. I'm not sure 100% why those are there if there's no information in them. This is what
Yeah,
Patrick Maynard received from Philadelphia police.
got you. Okay.
Good question, though. So I'm going to say repair orders, uh, Philadelphia Police Department. I'm going to say all repair orders or what was that form? It was 82 S92. 82 S91. S91 submitted uh, from, let's just say from November 1st. I don't know what all is going to be here, so I'm just going to take 1 month. From November 1, 2024 on to the date. Cool. I think that's all. Just gonna leave that there. I don't think I spelled anything wrong. All repair orders are Form HS91 submitted from November 1st, the date this request is ultimately filled. All right. Got a request out the door on FOIA Friday. I have a few other hot off the press items to start the call with. MuckRock is now stewarding the data liberation project. We filed our first request last week on one of two calls. We had two meetings last week, one about filing requests on MuckRock and onboarding some of the DLP volunteers to file requests, and then another about new data we're interested in. And we filed our first request for the DOL's WHISARD or WHISARD data. That is data on wage and labor violations. That can include things like problems with minimum wage, child labor, even problems with housing for migrant labor that was provided to them by their employer. So there's a ton of things in that data. It's a massive database. So I just wanted to shout out Adrian Nesta, the DLP volunteer, who spent a lot of time documenting what he could find about that data in DOL documentation online in the Government Addicts website. If you want to liberate data with us and join in on finding new data sources and analyzing them and getting ready to publish them on the DLP website, which looks like this, you can click this link and follow it to our Slack, where there is a lot of documentation on how you can get involved with the data liberation project. We're always looking for more volunteers, and there's more than enough work to do. With that, I want to talk to MuckRock senior developer Chris Amico about using public records to figure out what the heck happened when the biggest event in grappling was usurped by a competing tournament on the same weekend. So I'm going to stop sharing now and toss it to Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about your requests and the event more broadly.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. So I'll tell you about the event first because it's a little bit bonkers, and I feel like I spend a lot of my time explaining this sport that I both follow and participate in. And that sort of will set the scene for us all. So submission grappling, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is another version of it. If any of you watch the Olympics and you watch judo, that's another version of it. It's a weird sport. It looks like wrestling, except you win by putting your opponent in a stranglehold or a joint lock. And that also means that people fight. You often start a fight by just sitting down because you don't lose by pin. The more I explain it, the sillier it seems. And yet it's something I try to do a couple times a week. I will probably be doing it tomorrow. So it's a lot of fun. If you've never tried it, I encourage you to. I dragged Dylan along once, and I think he had fun.
I did.
So let me share. So this is the story. Hopefully, yep. This is the story that came out of it, which is just published today. I'm going to throw a link in the chat just so you can all read it. Um, so there's a big grappling tournament every other year called ADCC. That's the Abu Dhabi Combat Club. It was founded in the late 90s by the guy who's currently the national security advisor of UAE, and who is the son of the country's founder and the brother of the current president. When he was a college student in San Diego, he took a jiu-jitsu class and thought, this is a lot of fun. I have gobs of money. I'm going to create a tournament so all my favorite grapplers can fly out to Dubai and throw down for my entertainment. And this went on, this became the most prestigious grappling tournament, or at least among this rule set. It became one of the most prestigious grappling tournaments in the world. Um, it is both a big event and I think it's a big business. It's sort of weird because it's run by people for whom money doesn't really matter. Um, so it's weird, but it attracts the top talent in the sport, and the people who win it are considered the best grapplers in the world. Some of them have gone on to the UFC. If you watched like Damian Maia or Ryan Hall in the UFC, they've both competed in it and won. Um, I forget who else. There's a lot. Anyway, I follow this. I obsess over it. It's a super weird sport. They don't pay their athletes very well. And earlier in the year, one of the guys who had won, who was a two-time silver medalist, a guy named Craig Jones, said, I don't think I want to do this anymore because it doesn't pay me very well. It's not worth my time. The organizer of ADC said, if you think you can do it better, you go raise $3 million and run your own tournament. And he did. Um, and so there was a bunch of social media sniping over this. Um, they booked the event at the Thomas and Mack Center at the University of Nevada, and I went, "Oh, that's a public university. I think they're subject to public records law. Let's file some FOIAs." And so I filed this one. This is the first one in, when was that? May, June? End of May, right after they announced it. And I thought, there's no way they're just going to give me the contract because there's got to be some LLC that sits between them and that, like, sure, they're a public university, but there's probably some private entity that actually runs the arena. Nope. Week later, they sent me the contract. No redactions, no notes. Uh, yeah, right here, easy peasy. Um, had everybody's name on it, and we were off to the races. And I thought, okay, that's cool. Um, while this was happening, the two tournaments were, like I said, sniping at each other, but they're also competing for athletes because they were the same weekend. And so people who had won these grueling trial tournaments to get into the ADCC World Championships started dropping out. And I was watching that happen, and I said, I need to, like, just watch this roster and know when somebody just disappears off of it. Klaxon. So I set up a Klaxon alert, started getting emails every day whenever the roster changed, and ended up seeing a lot of people drop off the roster before they had actually announced where they were going. Um, so that was fun. Uh, and then, of course, everything ended up in Document Cloud. And so I have this project that has, I have 13 documents in it now. And this is just like this is where I've collected all my reporting. And it ended up being both a fun way to use all our tools and a fun way to follow this mess of a tournament or several tournaments. So yeah, the story is up now. Go read it. It's fun. Go watch there's a bunch of videos in there if you like submission grappling, or if you think maybe this is a sport I want to follow. There's some actually really good matches that are embedded in this story. It's all on YouTube and free. But yeah, this was a lot of fun to do, and it finally got published this morning. And they just announced that they're going to do another tournament next year, a CJI 2 in August. So I'm gonna file another FOIA and see if I can get the next contract. They haven't announced where it is, but maybe I can break some news.
Have you heard from other people in the submission grappling community that they were surprised that you got these documents? I probably imagine it's not like there's not a lot of intersection in submission grappling and FOIA nerds beyond.
Yeah, the overlap. I keep joking that the overlap is all on the MuckRock staff. Since Sam, our editor, also trains jujitsu and was all over this. So and Mitch used to do it, and yeah, there's not a lot of overlap. There are a couple journalists. I'm in a Discord for jujitsu fans, and there are a couple other people who've written about the sport in there. I don't think there's any other current journalists in there. And I think they weren't as shocked, but a lot of people were like, "What do you mean you got the contract? They just gave it to you?" And I said, "Yes, it's a public record." And so it felt a bit like a superpower to be able to just go and get these things. But um, yeah, it was a lot of fun to just like pick through these things. I did this all in public, so I just as soon as I got things, I started sharing them with people and saying, "What do you see?" So that was fun. Um, and people saw things that I didn't. Uh, I'll just show you one of them. It's sort of the thing that was like the 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 thing that I'm surprised that they just handed me, but this is their ticket sales. This is how many tickets they sold for how much money. This is actually the settlement worksheet for CJI. I have another one for ADCC that's just ticket sales. Um, but like this is what they spent, and this is what what it costs for it, like their rent, their front of house, their back of house costs. Yeah, this was their total like net revenue. So yeah. Uh Thomas and Max Center, like University of Nevada, I gotta shout them out because they were actually great about just turning around these requests in about a week each time. And gave absolutely no fuss about it.
Jim just asked a question in the chat about MuckRock having a Klaxon tutorial. Right now, Klaxon is up and running on Document Cloud, which should make it substantially easier to use than it was something hosting yourself. If you're a journalist, Document Cloud is available to you. It's free for journalists. You just have to go through the verification process of making sure you're a journalist. Um, Otherwise, I know it can be pretty tricky. I don't know if Chris wants to answer that anymore.
Yeah, Klaxon. So it is built in Document Cloud right now. It's an add-on. Um, so I can show you just how I set it up. Oh, I actually have it right here. So you can see my history. So this is I did turn it off after the tournament because it is gone. But this is the one that I did. I just had it for this is the I'll show you this. This is the roster for ADCC, and this is mostly what I was following, and they just list everybody. I actually know one of these guys. This guy's a friend of a friend, so he's very good. Unfortunately, lost in the first round. Um, but I just set this up, and I'm watching just a part of the page. I'm actually just watching like sort of this inner part of the page because there's a lot of other stuff around it that changes more frequently. And then I'm trying to think if I have the way Klaxon works with us is it snapshots the page and saves it to the Internet Archive. And so every time the page changes, there's a diff that gets posted. Let's see if I can dig one of those out of my email and post a link in the chat to it. But that's really it. And then you just save it and it runs. I think I had it running. I probably had it running hourly over the summer, and now I've turned it off because it's not changing anymore. But yeah, when the tournament was up and running, I think I had this one and I had another one. Oh, and then this JITS magazine. They were publishing the names of people who'd signed up for CGI, so that was a little bit behind. That one wasn't as useful. Um, but I use this a lot. I've had it watching OpenAI's R structure page since their thing with their leadership when they uh, fired Sam Altman over the weekend and then brought him back and when that was all weird. So that's been interesting to watch too. Um, and I watch the Supreme Court weekly. But yeah,
Cool.
that's Klaxon. You should use it and tell us how we can make it better.
I agree. Thanks for sharing, Chris. Jim, I'm going to move on to a few other things, so we'll get to your question at the end. Um, so yeah, go check out Chris's story. I don't know, Chris, if you'll hang on till the end if anyone has any questions for you. But if
Yeah,
Chris is
happy
not
to.
on, I can pass them or Chris will be on. Um, yeah, so that's an awesome story about sports and public records. And I think there's a lot of cool intersection that people don't realize there can be, especially when it involves public universities. So it's exciting when you actually get the records that you were asking for and you get them pretty quickly. But on the other hand, we're going to move on to the part of today's call where we talk about when the opposite of that happens, which is when you have to appeal a request. And I'm going to have Nick and John share a little bit in a second. But first, I'm just going to revisit some notes from a FOIA Friday, I think, in this past summer, or maybe in the spring of last year, where we talked a lot about appeals. And I'm just going to walk through very, very quickly my biggest appeal tips. Um, Keep it short. Don't be overwhelmed by the idea of writing appeal. I think a lot of people get to the point of writing an appeal and start to feel like, oh my gosh, now I'm in the legal world, or I have to be an attorney, or use even more legalistic language than usual. That is not the case, or doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes it can help. I think there's been different research that shows that. But when I'm trying to appeal a request or a request that was rejected, I really think of it more as challenging, not appealing. Appealing sounds like there's this big legal apparatus that I have to please, and they'll deliver their judgment to me, and there's not much I can do about it. But instead, I think about it as challenging because our adversarial legal system in the United States is about competing ideas and evidence. Really, what you're presenting in an appeal is the evidence that you think this exemption does not apply to the request that you filed, your ideas about that, and attempting to throw your ideas and evidence into the ring with the rejection from the records custodian. Um, Here I have a doc called The Anatomy of an Appeal that we went through on that call last summer. Um, this is a pretty short appeal, but again, I think it's good place to get folks started and thinking about appealing something. The basics are really just starting off with what you're appealing, what your request was, then moving towards how your request was rejected, what exemption was cited, and anything else the agency provided about that rejection. The next part is the due diligence that you have to do in writing an appeal, which is really thinking over that exemption that they cited to you. And if it applies, you can research case law or try to get to the bottom of it in other ways. But really what you're trying to say is this exemption that you gave me is not actually applicable to the documents I'm asking for. So in this case, I was I was given a rejection based on the fact that my request was unduly burdensome, but the amount of emails that they said was unduly burdensome to review were only 9 emails. And they didn't offer me any other way to narrow my request, as the law also states. So basically, I made the argument, one, 9 emails is not unduly burdensome. Two, you didn't ask me to narrow my request anyway before rejecting this. You didn't confer with me, as the law says, and they weren't working with me anyway beyond that. So basically, I said, this doesn't make sense to me based on what the law says. Um, that's me citing what the law actually says and saying, hey, what I said above, this is how I know that this should be the case. And then in the end, I just kind of highlighted that this request was important to the public and my role as a journalist. If you're a journalist, obviously this is not the type of appeal that you would make, but it can still help just to say there's important civic interest in these documents that you're asking for. Um, yeah, and that's the basics. But I also had two folks who offered to talk to me and us on the call today a little bit more about their different appeals they filed. And I'll start with Nick. Nick, can you tell me a little bit more about the Peace Corps emails and the law firm in Tanzania?
Yeah, this was a series we wrote based on a few tips we got, I think 2 years ago now. And long story short, there was a Peace Corps worker who was drunk and out late at night and hit and killed a street vendor. So when that happens, the State Department got involved and got him out of there really fast after he was attacked by the vendors. And we wanted to know about the settlement process, and we got some emails showing that, but of course they were heavily redacted, setting all kinds of exemptions, and we appealed. Specifically, we were appealing the date and timestamps and the subject lines of the emails that were redacted, which is annoying, making the argument that like some of the contents of the legal discussions could be exempt, but like the mere timing and subjects of their emails should not. So we kind of had a split decision on the answer.
So, what was their argument on why the actual timing and details of the emails should be redacted or exempt?
I don't think it makes sense. I mean, I think their argument was that it was still covered by the attorney-client privilege, as in the government was the client here, that had hired this firm to meet with these aggrieved parties. But I think we were trying to show that it was like rushed and they had already like concluded things like basically as it was unfolding, and not an actual like negotiation.
Oh, I see. And so initially they responded that they would be able to fulfill your request for the emails, but not the dates of the emails,
Right.
potentially for the reason that maybe they
We,
were aware of the timing of them as well.
yep. So we appealed the redactions in that case.
And what sort of argument did you make when you filed that appeal? How do you say, hey, these times and dates are a part of the response that I should have gotten for these reasons?
Yeah, I mean, we basically did what we followed your rubric. It's like say what you know and then explain why it matters and why it shouldn't be protected. Like there was this public incident and we knew the like perimeter of it, and we made the argument that we should know the insides of it.
I see. And then you sent me over another appeal. I forget which agency that was with, but can you tell us a little bit about that one as well?
Yeah, this one was really weird. This was a exemption 3. This is the Postal Service, which
Oh yeah.
was making the argument that we shouldn't know. We were trying to get cease and desist letters, which I guess they send a lot to combat like cyber fraud and people using their trademarks. And we just wanted all of their cease and desist letters. And they said we can't confirm or deny that we send cease and desist letters. And we made the argument that we had been leaked, like some were made public and we've been leaked a few. So like this is crazy to say that it's a secret because it's not. Like here are some examples.
And that was enough to demonstrate that that they wouldn't be able to make that argument based on the fact that those documents were actually already out there.
That one is the funnest email to get open up that says remanded in full. So they send it back.
Nice. Yeah, and that's interesting. We'll actually get to that a little bit more in a second when we talk about exemption 7A. And I'm actually going to have Rachel, who just came on camera, which is perfect timing, talk a little bit about that. We've been talking about appeals in general, The other part of this call, I want to talk about Exemption 7 and 7A specifically. Exemption 7 is the law enforcement exemption. It's also the most cited exemption in federal FOIA. I put a few links to some research on that in the document. So it's really important to know the ins and out of this if this is the one that you're going to face the most. And 7A is about ongoing investigations. And that's what Rachel is going to talk about. Rachel, can you tell me a little bit more about the Clery Act and Rhodes College and how this began, how your FOIA request began?
Yeah. So at the time, I was a student journalist at Rhodes College, and I was reporting on Title IX and Clery Act violations, which Clery Act is like the federal law that tells colleges how they need to report and collect crime statistics. And so mine reporting was basically talking about Rhodes College and them like kind of systematically underreporting crimes. So they would call carjackings, auto thefts, and sexual assault just regular assault and battery. Um, and so in the middle of my reporting, I actually did file a complaint with the Department of Education, which as a working journalist, I wouldn't do now, like file a complaint and then report on the complaint, but I was a student. So I ended up like a couple months after I filed the complaint, I knew that the investigation had kind of proceeded. And so I started filing FOIAs for records related to a compliance assessment that the Department of Education did with Rhodes College. And I knew that the records I was asking for existed because the Commercial Appeal in Memphis began reporting on this story too. And they showed one of their journalists in person some emails from the DOE to Rhodes College. So I knew that some emails existed and I was asking for all of the emails. And then they responded with a GLOMAR response, which is whether when they can't confirm or deny records exist. And they cited the ongoing investigation exemption as well as a privacy exemption too. And that's because the DOE really like they consider their Clear Act investigations like they don't ever release records in like the average time it takes to complete an investigation is like 5 or 7 years. And they consider it at the time when I spoke on the phone with them after I got this response, they were explaining how, even though, there's multiple steps that investigation has to take before it goes through the final program review, that they consider it all one investigation, even though it kind of stops in the middle sometimes, which was the case with Rhodes. And so in my appeal, I basically argued that one, it wouldn't hamper any investigation if I got these records because Rhodes had already gotten these records too, like it's email communication between them. So nothing can hurt their investigation. And also, I kind of argued that, like, you guys can't just say there's a hypothetical investigation that's always ongoing, and you need to and it's obviously stopped at this point because there's been like kind of a resolution, even though they ended up picking up the investigation later. And so that was my main argument that this is a step in your investigation. It's the compliance assessment. It's been done. Give me the records. And so then I got the records like a month later.
Yeah, and I think that's like just really important to highlight because you did the two things that I want to talk about in terms of challenging Exemption 7A, which is the definition I gave a second ago was like a for records that could interfere with a law enforcement proceeding. The two important words there are interfere and proceeding. If that record won't actually interfere, then that exemption should probably not apply. If that investigation is actually not proceeding, then it has nothing to interfere with. And it sounds like you, in your argument, kind of made both of those, or kind of challenged both of those things. One, that this investigation was actually ongoing, and
hmm
that the records would interfere in any real way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there definitely is case law that I cited in my appeal, even though I think I did a little too much case law, but I was kind of at the time, Jason Leopold was suing the CIA and FBI for records that kind of matched what I was doing in my appeal. So I kind of copy and pasted a lot of that from into my appeal. But yeah, it was just a kind of common sense argument that what you just said, like it's not going to interfere with the investigation. And I think the law, like in whatever lawsuits that have come out about this, says that the departments really have to show that it would like actually interfere and not just like, embarrass someone, something like that.
And you were working on this at the time as a student journalist. Was this the first appeal that you had filed, or had you filed appeals before this?
No, I think this is my first appeal. So, And I did get some help from the Student Press Law Center at the time. So
And was it still a frightening and arduous thing, or at the time was it?
yeah, like
Yeah,
I didn't think it was gonna work, but I did put like a lot of time into it and stressed about it. But it ended up because I submitted the appeal and then they ended up just wanting to set up a phone call with me and talking it through, which I thought was really nice. And then yeah, they just accepted it after that.
cool. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm going to come back to Exemption 7A in a second. I
Mhm.
have one more appeal to talk through, and that is with John Garrettson. John, you still on the call?
Yeah, hey,
There
what's
you
up?
are. Yeah, talk to
Okay,
me
cool.
about public and private partnerships and your appeal to the Mass DPH.
Yeah, I saw someone actually, Lori posted a pretty good link that is about this too in the chat here. Um, so I was trying to get the municipal reporting for the state of Massachusetts regarding its use of money from the national opioid settlement, which Massachusetts is getting about $1 billion over the next 18 years, with 40% of that going to cities and towns across the state. And every year, these municipalities have to submit a report to the Bureau of Substance and Addiction Services, which is under the Department of Public Health, um, about basically how they've spent the money that they've received. Um, and so I knew those were going to be due on October 30th of this year for fiscal year 2024. So I filed a public records request to state for them. And the state had basically contracted out receiving all these. I think it's something like 236 cities and towns. And so they hired a contractor to set up a website. And then the contractor was using Salesforce to collect the reports from each city and town. So the DPH was like, well, they're not. Basically, they were making the argument that they weren't PDF files. So they weren't like discrete records they could provide. Um, and so then I had to appeal that. And I was able to, on the basis that an agency relationship was created between the contractor and the state. Unfortunately, that was on November 15th, that determination, and I still have yet to receive an actual response from the Department of Public Health.
I'm going to share in the chat a link to FOIA Friday a few months ago, where we talked with Miranda Spivak, a reporter who has a long tenure of reporting on public and private partnerships. And one of the things we talked a lot about in that call is one of the obvious ways that documents are available even though they're produced or under the I don't want to say jurisdiction, but they're produced or created by a private entity is when that private entity is serving a government function. And like John was saying, it sounds like in this case, it's pretty obvious that Salesforce or whoever's collecting these records and processing them, they're essentially serving the government function and very directly contracted with a government agency. So that would make those records available under the Massachusetts public records laws.
Yeah, correct.
But the exemption they cited to you was actually more about the way the records are maintained.
Yeah, they didn't actually even cite an exemption specifically. Um, they basically just said they didn't have access to them because of whatever format they were in, and because they had hired a third party contractor to perform the work, which is kind of annoying.
And then how did you appeal that?
Let's see. I just said, the use of a private contractor in this way should not release their office from the responsibility to maintain appropriate records and provide them, because they were, they were basically making the argument that DPH itself didn't have the actual reports from the cities and towns, which maybe whether they did or did not, the search has to, in cases like this, the search has to extend to the vendor as well. And I think that applies for maybe not all, but quite a few states in the country.
And you still haven't heard back from them on that appeal yet?
Yeah, no, it's pretty frustrating. And another frustrating part is the vendor, caremass.org. So they have a sort of data dashboard on their website. And if you click on it, it brings you to, it's a public Tableau project. And the person who made that was working on the fiscal year 2024 one as I was waiting for the records. That was the same information as what they were putting on this Tableau project. But something was off about it. So, I downloaded all of that, but I'm not sure if it's accurate or not. And I sent a follow-up email to the TPH just before this meeting, and I got a vacation response from the records access officer. So it's like,
so it might be some time till you hear anything, but I will definitely bring you back on the call if you do get a response on that.
okay, yeah, I wish I had more to report about it, but at the moment I'm just kind of waiting on that, I suppose.
Well, thanks for sharing, and thanks to everyone, Nick and Rachel and Chris as well for sharing some things with the group. I'm going to quickly share my screen again and come back to exemption 7A, since that was one of the main things that we wanted to focus on in this call. Like I said, exemption 7 is used more than any other exemption. Here's a couple links to some research on that from the Project on Government Oversight and the GAO, or Government Accountability Office, as well. And like I talked about with Rachel, one of the things you really want to focus on if you're challenging a 7A response to something that you requested are that this could interfere with law enforcement proceedings. And that means, one, showing that the type of documents that you requested won't truly interfere or are not being withheld on the basis of the function that they could interfere. It's kind of hard to describe, but I dropped a few links here about this as well. Basically, if you're requesting a lot of documents and receive a 7A, the agency is allowed to, under federal law and the case law that exists, group those into different categories and make generic exemptions, or make a generic classification of those for the 7A exemption. But even when they say like all letters, for example, those letters that generic category that they give has to serve a specific function. So they can't just say all letters would interfere with the investigation. They have to say letters from possible witnesses. So they have to make clear that that these documents or public records that they would be opening up to the public would interfere in some way that could, for example, give the people accused of a crime the chance to tamper with or destroy evidence. And that function has to be built into the categories they're giving to you. If it's much, much smaller than that, they have to be clear about that specific document or that specific thing that you're asking for and how it interferes with the investigation. And then they also have to show that this is an ongoing investigation, that it is truly proceeding. One way that I would think about doing that is just checking in with the agency that gives me this response and trying to better understand the resources they're putting into an investigation. The Pogo article that I linked here talks more about exemption 7A, and one of the best quotes from it is right at the end. They say a thread running through at least some of these cases of exemption 7 being cited relates to agencies not adequately checking on the status of an investigation before withholding information. This looks like is what happened in 2018 when MuckRock requested documents related to the death of a journalist from the FBI. They originally gave us a 7A exemption, but then when we appealed it, they said that no longer applied. They never gave a response about why that 7A no longer applied. But from the looks of it, it could have been that they didn't actually check that that investigation was ongoing properly. And so they assumed it was ongoing when it actually wasn't. So again, make sure that the investigation really is ongoing and that you know that there's actually resources being put into it by the agency to justify calling it ongoing. I think that's all for exemption 7A today, and we've made it all the way through our very long agenda. So I'm going to open up the call to just some broader questions before we head out into the weekend. Lori, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, hi. Happy holidays, everybody. So it's nice to hear that another person from Massachusetts is struggling with me. I listened to the tape because I wasn't able to attend that session. And what I gleaned from the session about, private-public partnerships is that Massachusetts, as was referenced, usually doesn't have to release public records, but if it's an outsourced function, you can ask for the records. And this is my question. So if I have the contract and there are certain documents that the city, which is getting taxpayer funds from the city and also HUD funds from the federal government, if they're accepting money, the city is accepting money, and then saying to the private whatever, we want you to do this, we're paying you to do this, and these are the documents we need from you. Can I ask for those documents is the question, legitimately.
Yes, I don't remember specifically if there's anything that would cause problems with that in the Massachusetts public records law specifically, but that seems like a pretty textbook case of when the documents or information that a private company is producing clearly fit under the duties of a local government. So I would think that the answer to that would be a yes, but I don't know if anyone else on this call has any other input or has requested these types of documents in Massachusetts specifically.
I'm sorry, Lori, could you just remind me one more time what the specific documents are?
So I didn't want to, so what it is, documents like financial reports, minutes of meetings, certain kinds of accountability reports, survey results, that are required under the contract that this entity is obliged to do. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's a private entity.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, as far as I know, as long as it's under contract with the state and there's this agency relationship created by that, I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't.
Okay.
Have they denied it for any?
No, I never put it in because I'm shy.
Oh, okay,
I haven't put it in yet. I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure that I was spot on before I started nagging them. Can I ask two other really quick questions?
Yes.
So I did get I got documents from a FOIA request first time. And the question is, do you guys write a thank you note or do I write the thank you note? Because I'm coming through you and I'm a child of the whatevers, and we wrote thank you notes in my day. So do you guys do it or should I?
You can, there's a button on MuckRock's request portal where it says say thanks, and you could just say thanks really quick, or you can write it yourself.
No, I
But
don't think you know
hit the
that.
button that says say thanks, and it'll auto-generate a reply that says, hey, thanks, we really appreciate your work on this, and then it sends. And then basically that'll close out a lot of things on the MuckRock side as well.
Perfect. The second question is, so they gave me a link to get the documents, and I have very good reason to believe they have my computer ID number, whatever you guys call that. And if I link in to get the documents from a portal that they've set up, can they figure out who I am?
Um, that is a good question, and one I don't know the answer to specifically. Um,
Okay. If they know,
But
they
those documents should just be put back into the MuckRock portal. So you won't have to actually go to the government portal. If you file this request in MuckRock and the
yeah.
request was fulfilled, if they say, oh, we put the documents in the portal and you don't see them on your MuckRock feed, then click the Get Help button and say, hey, the agency says these are in the portal, but they're not on my feed yet. Can you grab them from the feed? That way you wouldn't have to log into the government portal either.
I didn't have to log in at all, but that sounds reassuring. So thank you very much, everybody. Uh everybody have a great new year. Thank you for your help.
Thanks, Larry. I see, I think a couple questions in the chat. Uh, um, let's see here. So Brian Simboli asks, how long should one wait for a FOIA to be filled before asking about its status if you've not heard back? I would check if this is a state level or local request. I would check your state public records law on the specific timelines that an agency has to reply to your request. If you're filing in MuckRock, those are auto-generated for you at the bottom of the request, so you can see how long it should actually take them. Sometimes I set remind me notifications in Slack or on my phone to get a reminder that they've passed the time they should for replying. But I would wait to that time and then call on that day. If you can really stay on top of it and point to the law that says they have to respond in 5 days, 15 days, 20 days, that will always be the most useful way, I think, to show that you know the law and that you're asking them to respond in the time frame given by the public records law. Michelle Mondo, any ideas for getting around the embarrassment exemption? John replied with what my question would have been, which is this a thing? I have really not honestly heard a lot about this exemption before, and it's something that I can take a look into for a future call. But Michelle, do you want us to tell us a little bit more about that?
So in Texas, we have an exception to our state law that falls under privacy. And so what they say is, this could cause extreme embarrassment. This could invade their privacy in a way that would cause a person public embarrassment. So we're not going to release it to you. And they started using that a lot more recently than I think they used to. And so since we're talking about exemptions, I thought I'd just throw that out there and see if anybody has a way around it, because it's how do you prove when someone will be embarrassed? It's easier to say this isn't ongoing, because the other one, of course, is the ongoing investigation. They use that all the time. That's easier to get around. I haven't really found a good way on the embarrassment part.
There's this other person in working the case.
Yes, and I think someone's mic is still on, and I can't figure out whose it is. Oh, maybe Michelle, maybe it was actually the background of your call. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I hadn't heard about it. But I think it's definitely something worth thinking about in another call. Michelle, is it okay if I email you and ask a little bit more about that? Especially, I think it's interesting that it seems like it's been being used more. That raises some question marks for me.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I'm at a PI conference right now and we're on lunch. So I just came into this and so feel free to email me. I think you have all my information.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and no problem. I just wanted to make sure someone wasn't interrupting you, but it's totally fine for you to interrupt you. Great. Let's see if we have some other questions. Elaine Middleman asked, Dylan, I would like to send you an email question. What is your email? So my email is dylan@muckrock.com. You can send your question there, but also at the top of the document for today, the notes for today's call, there is a session feedback and question form, which I always point people towards. I do check that often. And would love for you to submit there as well, just because it's nice to see all the questions over time in one place. Also, if I see specific types of questions coming up over and over again, then I know it's worth digging into those questions or that topic a little bit more rigorously. So drop the question there if you can, and I look forward to hearing from you. P. Davis says, what do you do if agency doesn't give info on how to appeal? So that's a good question. In most states, there is a specific agency to appeal to, or I know in a lot of states there is. In some states, I think you actually just have to go up the totem pole of whatever agency you appealed or you've originally filed the request to. Could you give a little bit more info about that request and whether or not you were able to appeal it or just weren't sure where to appeal it? I'm going to give P. Davis a second to type that in, and that'll be the last question I take before we end the call for today. VA State Police, no appeal mechanism. Yeah, interesting. Virginia is we actually have a ongoing lawsuit right now. I don't think related to state police, but related to police records in Virginia. I'm going to make a note of this to look into on our next call as well. Yeah, I mean, generally, yeah, you should be able to either go up the totem pole at that agency or appeal to the mediation agency in your state. But I'll take a look at the longer question earlier in the chat. Great. Well, thank you everyone so much. It's been 9 months since we started FOIA Fridays last Sunshine Week, and I'm looking forward to a new year of FOIA Fridays. So see you in 2025.